I actually do work quite a bit. I was part of the Canine Tactical Combat Casualty Care Committee that wrote the guidelines. So I work with them. I've got some good friends in special ops, and that's probably the reason that the whole question of hydration came up, because the special ops guys are like, I'm going to give sub-Q fluids. The guys at Lackland and the dog center there are like, you're not going to give sub-Q fluids. And so the two of them are going, and I'm like, stop. We'll answer the question. So that's been really important, because there are very strong opinions, on both sides. And I actually don't have an opinion. It's like, well, let's figure out what works. I'm not biased that way, which is fine. It's like, wow, I was really kind of surprised that the dog surged better with the electrolyte solution. But whatever, I don't, whatever. It's just, let's do what's best for the dogs. Science and data is everything. Any other questions?
I just had a question on the brand of electrolyte replacement you're using, Oral.
Okay, I will tell you the brand. I will also tell you that they bought me this coat. And I love this coat. And they have donated it to the 9/11 dogs for the last 10 years. So I do have a little bit of a bias towards them. It's called Hydrolyte. It's a very small company. It was designed based on the Arlie Reynolds, who's a nutritionist at Purina that works with sled dogs. He helped with the design of it a long time ago. We may end up adjusting the formula based on our studies, but right now I'm really happy with it. I can also tell you that we did a study in dogs in the emergency room with hemorrhagic diarrhea, using that, offering that versus putting them on IV fluids. And 13 out of 20 dogs drank it. If they drank it, they didn't need IV fluids, which is a pretty remarkable outcome. That's going to be published sometime this fall in JAVMA. But that's a really great alternative, because we see a lot of hemorrhagic diarrhea in our pet population. And if we can economically send them home and also not have hemorrhagic diarrhea all over our emergency room, have it in your bathroom, so it's going to give us a whole new opportunity to treat these dogs.
The ones that I've seen used a lot of times, people are hoping the dogs would drink it.
Yeah.
They said they really liked it.
This is chicken flavored, and I'll tell you, because I use it with my dog when we do agility, and once I had my water bottle and his water bottle, don't drink it. It's really nasty. But they really like it. The only dogs that didn't like it, I think, were mostly little white dogs. But my dog's a little white dog, so he liked it. But the other thing we found out, the dogs that didn't drink it tended to be sicker longer. They tended to have more metabolic abnormalities. So if you catch them when they're not really sick, and we gave them Serenia so that they'd stop vomiting, and it worked. The combination worked like a charm. And these guys all regained hydration. They regained body weight. Their hematocrits came down without any IVs, which was, I wasn't expecting it to be that good.
Why do you think the dogs from 9/11 didn't have respiratory?
That's such a great question. And the only thing that I can clearly say is that dogs don't get asthma spontaneously. I mean, it's not, to create asthma in a dog is a really difficult thing to do. So their immune system is different in their respiratory response. And I think that might be part of it. I think they probably filtered things out better with their long noses than we did. I also suspect there might be an interaction between the mind and body. The emotional component that builds, that weakens your immune system and builds disease. The dogs weren't affected in the same way. So there's so many things, but I think physiologically, their lungs respond differently to an insult than ours do.
How long are their working day time? How long are they actually out searching?
That's a great question, too. And 9/11 was unprecedented. All right, we were on 12-hour shifts, which were usually 16-hour shifts, and it was really hard. My job was to say, your dog has to come off the pile and rest now. And that was really hard, because I had to fight against fire chiefs and other people saying, we need a dog. And I pretty much held my ground, and the dogs under my direct care did great. other people were not able to have that veterinary support. And so those dogs were more prone to overworking, dehydration, and not drinking was a big problem there because there's so much going on. They're excited. There was one picture of Bear who drinks Kool-Aid. He flavored the water just so that it would be, more interesting, in that environment. And that's, those are issues that we have to address. And so, when the VMAT teams came in, and they were also really helpful in providing the medical support for these dogs, it was really difficult, but most of the veterinarians weren't down at ground zero. I was like in the middle of it, and I was able to say, no, this is what our dogs do. They have to stop. They have to come in. They have to be in their crates. They have to be away from everything. They need a break. But all of us, I went for 9 days without sleeping more than about 12 hours total. So it was a pretty brutal environment. Any other questions?
I've been taught 2 different ways to manage heatstroke.
Mm-hmm.
One with alcohol, there's a group that's very strongly alcohol, like with pads and things like that, so that's cool faster, and one that's very no alcohol. I guess what's your opinion when you work with?
Okay, so the biggest thing is you prevent heat stroke, you don't treat it. The second biggest thing is, okay, so let's think about the physiology. So evaporative heat loss, okay, so alcohol, yeah, great. So how much surface area do you have? Pads, not much. Flammable source of, stuff, alcohol. Makes me a little nervous. Problem with water can be, depending on the coat, yeah, they can end up, holding on to some of that water. But I'm a big fan of water, dousing them in water. And the most recent information, this is Janice Baker, again, doing a lot of stuff looking at what's our technique, and ice water is the recommended cooling. So they use in people. It's been documented. When I went to school, it was like, don't use ice water to cool because they're going to vasoconstrict and it's going to cause all sorts of crazy problems. It's really, I don't know if there's a difference in dogs, but the most of the scientific data and the animal data is pushing ice water, at least cold water. And I know when we play fly ball, we always have a big swimming pool, and the dogs go jump in the swimming pool. There's a lot of alcohol at fly ball, but usually it doesn't go on the dog's feet. So, and even in the emergency room, we use ice bags. Alcohol is, first of all, it's like everyone's like, whoa, who's got the alcohol out? So I'm a water person, and lots of it. That is such a great question, and adaptation, acclimatization is a huge problem, especially when you're talking about going from someplace that is, sort of temperate to someplace that is extreme, whether extreme cold or extreme heat, and we have seen it, and that's another question. How do we best adapt to that? How do we condition the dogs to tolerate that environment? And so we have a lot of discussions. The border protection folks are all in El Paso, and so they're raising the dogs down there in that extreme heat. So they're conditioned for that. Is that the way to do it? Or there's a kennel up in Maine that has fabulous search and rescue dogs, but they get all aspects and never horribly hot. But are they better off in Texas? I don't know. The different breeds, I don't know. There's certainly some breeds that don't tolerate the heat as well. I gave a seminar last month in Ohio, and this woman had Norwegian elk hounds, and they were search dogs, and she was saying, well, my dog overheats all the time. I'm like, yeah? It's from Norway. That's the way they are. And they're triple coat, they've got this really heavy undercoat. And she's like, and I've been working on the treadmill. It's like, well, it's got a lot of hair, and that's what it's always been bred for, is to tolerate the cold, not the heat. So maybe you need to think about, approaching it differently, or just being a winter search dog.
You have talked a lot about the prehydration, and you talked a little bit about the stress diarrhea. Are you or is anyone doing any studies with doing prophylactic, probiotics or any other kind of treatment to prevent the stress diarrhea?
That's a great question. We are not doing a study there. IMS did a study. I believe it was with working dogs because it's what kind of latched me on to Prostora. We use Prostora in our dogs anytime. We've got one dog who's on it all the time. And you know, anytime there's any kind of disruption in their normal GI flora, they're on it. I like probiotics because I feel that they're safe and they make sense to me. The gut health is such a huge aspect of our general health. So is there data? I don't have the data other than what studies I've seen that they have published. But definitely the police dogs, I think they should all be on it. I think the dolphin story is a wonderful one. It's very cool. I have met Bob Bailey, who has been a trainer who, 40 years ago, he started training the dolphins, and actually he trained cats and crows and all these other crazy animals for the military. So I've heard some of it. I also have learned a ton from the sea mammal trainers because their techniques really do rely on a lot of positive reinforcement. But I don't have any personal connections with the dolphin trainers. I know several people who've done dolphin training, which is so fun.
Are you strictly positive?
Strictly is a really hard definition because if we actually had this discussion with our student behavior club and our behaviorists. Okay, so what is punishment? So punishment is anything that's any stimulus that's going to decrease the frequency of an unwanted behavior. So of course there's some punishment involved. And do I yell at the dogs? It's like, Morgan, shut up! You know, I mean, but it is, you know, what we're doing is training. We aren't using aversive. We're force-free is pretty much what I would say on the... Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I use non-reward markers or whatever else you want to call that because I don't know how to do it any other way. I'm amazed at some people that can do that without. I don't know how. Our head trainer has 31 years experience in the police force. She came in with a history of aversive training, but she's so fabulous because she has adopted and learned and really employs all of the other things and very open to those aspects. You know, we definitely need to let the dogs know when they're screwing up because they're kids and they'll push us. But you know, how we do that? Do we hit them? No, we don't hit them. But we take away either the opportunity to play or, you know, they're definitely wrong. Try again. So the question is, breeds from naturally warmer climates, like what kind of breeds? We actually had an Adaptation hound at our center because the president of our university wanted us to train it for her. It's a cool dog. Drive? Adaptation. Ibizan. Yeah, it had a drive for the geese. But, you know, it's I had a greyhound, and it reminded me a lot of my greyhound. It's like, yeah, and like maybe some of the others, a Basenji? No, probably not. You know, so it is that combination. And I think heat tolerance is something that we can develop. It's sort of, I grew up in Ohio and I live in Philadelphia. I tolerate the heat. My sister grew up in Ohio and she lives in Phoenix. She does not tolerate the cold. And we're from the same genetic stock. You know, so there is a little bit of an adaptive learning, and I think that's an important part of it. I think hydration impacts it. I think fitness impacts it. You know, hair coat may, and we can sort of do what we can with that. You know, do we shave dogs? Do we not shave dogs? That's a whole other question that I don't know the answer to. These are great questions. It's really fun. I love talking about this stuff, as you can tell. Anything else? Because I'm sure that people are like having, you know, a need for a bio break. All right, thanks. And we'll come back and hear some other good stuff.